Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CMD's second webinar of this CMD webinar series, Advocacy Using Your Voice for Change webinar. My name is Avery, and I work in Outreach and Engagement for CMD. And I'm also here with Kelly Berger, who is the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for CMD as well. We're very excited to be here with you all today because this topic is something I personally am involved in and am very passionate about. So this is going to be an educational webinar focused on using your voice to evoke change in the rare disease space, but this can also be applied to really any topic or subject. We are going to be touching on the fact that your voice can truly make a difference in any cause that you're passionate about. So the definition of advocacy is public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. So obviously, to make something change for the better, you need to advocate for it to add support to making that change. I hope that makes sense. Advocacy comes in many forms, from legislation to work or school to travel or even your daily needs. We all advocate even if we don't realize it. So this webinar will also be recorded for on-demand viewing on our YouTube channel as well. Okay, so today we're going to be covering a lot of ground. A community engagement or social media expert is going to be talking about how you can use social media to advocate and how young adults can use their age to their advantage. Our legislative advocacy team lead and a representative from an organization we closely partner with will be talking about what we do, how you can get involved, some important bills, etc. We have an advocate here to talk about how you can apply advocacy to the workplace. So like how to get the right accommodations needed to complete a successful workday. She will also talk about how to advocate for your medical team. So like how to get appropriate respiratory care when you need very specific care. And then travel advocacy, so like accessible travel accommodations and how to get what you need, self-advocating on the go when you're staying at a new place to suit your abilities, etc. And of course, we have some community members and advocates here to speak about their experiences with advocacy. So just a quick PSA, we will be utilizing the Zoom Q&A function during the webinar. And we do have Q&A at the end of the webinar for our amazing and informative speakers. So you can save your questions until then, or you can start entering them into the Zoom Q&A portal at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll get to them soon. There's also the normal Zoom chat portal available, so please use that for, say, tech questions, programming, comments, etc. And use the Q&A function for questions for the speakers and the webinar. We and staff will be monitoring both. So today we are joined by a group of amazing people. We have legislative advocacy team lead and CMD parent, Lani Knutson. We have Katelyn Laws, who is the Rare Disease Legislative Advocates or RDLA program coordinator at the EveryLife Foundation. We have Taylor Kane, who is the founder and executive director of Remember the Girls. We have Andrea Klein, who is the founder and president of Breathe with MD. Jake Hytken, who is the DEI and ERG Engagement Manager at Snap Inc. And then we have Sandra Mermelstein and Stephanie Royster, who are both community members and legislative advocates. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Taylor, who is the Community Engagement Manager at All Stripes and is the founder and executive director at Remember the Girls. She is also a rare disease advocate and speaker, consultant, and author, being that she is a carrier of the X-linked genetic disorder, adrenoleukodystrophy, or ALD for short. She's going to give us her guidance and knowledge on social media and young adult advocacy. So the floor is yours, Taylor.
Thanks, Avery. Thanks, everyone, for having me today. I'm really excited to speak about this topic. So I'm going to share my screen because I have some slides. All right, here we go. So I'm going to be speaking to you for a couple minutes today about both young adult advocacy and social media advocacy. And, these topics are definitely really intertwined. My story, Avery touched on this a little bit, but I am a member of the rare disease community, and my rare disease journey began in 2001 when my dad was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease called adrenoleukodystrophy, or ALD for short. And at the time of his diagnosis, I was 3 years old, and the geneticist told my family that since ALD is an X-linked disease, which means that it's carried on the X chromosome, all men with the disease will pass the condition down to their daughters who will be considered carriers. So we knew that I was a carrier from a really early age and that I had a 50% chance of passing the disease down when I had kids one day. I lost my dad in 2003 when I was 5 years old. ALD is a neurological brain disease, and it still has no effective treatment or cure, unfortunately, but there's definitely a lot of research headed in the right direction. As I got older, I started, sharing my story. And at the time, I didn't even know what I was doing was considered advocacy. I was just, writing about my dad. I was, speaking at our family's yearly fundraiser. Like, I really had no idea that what I was doing was advocacy. It's just something that felt right to me at the time. But I definitely slowly but surely became an advocate over the years, mostly starting in middle school when a newborn screening test was developed for ALD. Newborn screening is when babies are born in each state, the state will take a drop of blood from their heel and test them for different genetic disorders or different rare diseases that need to be treated as soon as possible. And ALD usually affects boys rather than men. My dad was lucky and he had the later onset version, but ALD usually affects boys. So I started advocating in New Jersey to get them to add ALD to the newborn screening panel, which they signed into law in 2013. I also got involved with some other advocacy efforts. I'm the co-founder of YAR, which is the Young Adult Representatives of RDLA, which is a group with the EveryLife Foundation that really empowers other young people to get involved in legislative advocacy. In 2017, well, let me backtrack a little bit. When I was in high school, I always knew my carrier status, but when I was in high school, I started learning that carriers were also at risk for symptoms of ALD, which wasn't really common knowledge when I was younger, but there was more, research coming out, and it was clear that many carriers did eventually get symptoms, not as severe as the boys and men, but, symptoms such as walking difficulties, bladder and bowel dysfunction, and similar things. So I definitely had to, face that head on. And I currently don't have symptoms yet, but I know that the chances that I will get them one day are really high. But in 2017, I learned that there was other X-linked conditions where women were pretty much considered just carriers and they were assumed to be asymptomatic, and it was really hard for them to get their symptoms taken seriously. So I formed Remember the Girls, which is the only organization in the world which brings together carriers of X-linked diseases to fight for the issues that matter for us. So talking about advocacy more specifically, I am definitely a true believer that people can be an advocate at any age. The first time I shared my story about my dad was when I was 5 years old in kindergarten. I would love to, if there was a video of that. I can't even imagine what I said at the time, but I really think you can use your age to your advantage. Young people have a lot of power. We have a lot of skills that other generations just don't have. We're digital natives. We're so used to growing up and using technology. And we just have these skills that we can really use to our advantage. My 4 tips for advocates of all ages are to establish trust and credibility in the rare disease space, develop consistent and genuine content on social media, cater to your audience, and of course, to showcase your personality. I want to touch on the difference between traditional advocacy and social media advocacy, because some of our speakers later on will be speaking a little bit more about what we would call traditional advocacy. However, there is a lot of overlap, like legislative advocacy, for example. You can be in person and meet with legislators or meet with them over Zoom, but you can also, use social media to send messages, send pictures, send tweets to legislators or different people in politics to advocate for the issues you care about. So social media advocacy really allows you to reach people from all over the world. And that's what I think is so special about it. It's given us this platform to be able to share our story with not just our local community, but people literally in every country in the world. Also, with social media, you can advocate from anywhere at any time. Like, you can wake up and send out a tweet and just be doing advocacy. And that's what I think is so cool about it. It also enables you to share your story in a more accessible way. you know, there's so many different ways you could go about sharing your story on social media. You could write a blog post, you could do social media posts, you could create a video, you could be on a podcast and share that on social media. Like there's just so many different ways. And it really, caters to the different ways that people who follow you or people in your network want to consume media. So like someone might prefer reading a blog post, someone might prefer watching a YouTube video, and social media advocacy allows you to like cater to that. It's really important to know your audience. And by this, I mean like the people in your network on social media and the people that you're following, especially if you are trying to build like a brand on social media as an advocate, either on your personal profiles or if you have advocacy specific profiles. I mostly use my personal profiles just because my life is so, about like rare disease stuff that for me, it's so intertwined. But knowing your audience and what kind of content that, you want to share with them about your story is really important. So I think finding your niche is a really important thing. And that's not too hard in the rare disease community because we all, are living with a rare disease. We all have really unique stories. The size of your audience really doesn't matter. I don't have a lot of followers. You don't need to have a lot of followers to feel like you're connecting with the people that follow you. It's really more about like engagement and discussions and having conversations. Organic growth is the best growth. You won't wake up one day with like 500 new followers who are, really like obsessed with wanting to hear your story. And the rare disease community, that's just not as realistic. There's a lot of us, there's 300 million worldwide people living with a rare disease, but, it's definitely more difficult to get people to, want to follow our content unless they have a personal connection, but it's not impossible. You can also share content that your audience cares about. Like, for example, on my Twitter, I have a lot of genetic counselors following me. So I create content that I think that they'll want to see, like trying to give them a patient or a carrier perspective. And then this ties into my next point, which is connecting with others who are not directly in the rare disease community, but are in related communities like a disability community, et cetera. Also, every network is a little bit different, as you all probably know. I won't read through these, but it's definitely important depending on what social media you're on to know how to cater your message that way. Like you're definitely not going to post the same thing on TikTok and LinkedIn, for example. Just to wrap things up, social media can definitely be a toxic place, if you let it be. But there are a lot of ways to use social media for good. And there are positive ways to use it. And I think the main way to do that is just through advocacy. And as Avery said, all of these things do apply to rare disease advocacy, but also can apply to any issue you care about, really. Social media gives us a platform to not only share our stories, but encourage people to act. As I said, connect with people all over the world. Social media is used for advocacy so much now, which I think is so incredible, but celebrities, politicians, everyday people like us, and enables us to use our voices from anywhere, even the bathtub. You can, literally be doing advocacy from anywhere at any time. And that's why it's so powerful. And that's it on my end. If you have any questions, you can send them in the Q&A, or if you want to follow me or connect, here's my contact information. But all right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Taylor. That was awesome.
Thanks, Avery.
Okay. Well, yeah, so thank you so much, Taylor. That was super helpful and informative in terms of how young adults or teens should use their age to their advantage. So next, we're going to hear from Lani, who most of you probably know, and Katelyn, who are going to speak on the CURE CMD legislative advocacy team, how you can get involved and important current legislative actions you can take and how they relate and can improve the lives of people affected by not only CMD, but all people with rare diseases. So we all believe that every voice matters, and that affected individuals are the key to changing public policy. So after we have Stephanie, who's going to speak about her experiences with advocacy, So like why she participates in it, how long she has been participating in it, and an advocacy event that she is really proud of, and why others should become advocates. So Lani and Katelyn, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Let me just share my screen here. Excellent. We'll start with Katelyn.
Great. So, hey everyone, my name is Katelyn. I'm the RDLA coordinator at the EveryLife Foundation, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the power of patient advocacy. So what is legislative advocacy? Legislation and public policy impact so many things that we deal with on a day-to-day, including science, the drug development process, and access to treatments. The good news is you have the power to affect change in any of those ways that public policy impacts your day-to-day life. You can do this by taking an active role in the political process, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that on a later slide. And the most important thing to note here is that you do have the power to influence legislation and policy because your legislators want to hear from you. You are their constituent and you are the expert on your rare disease and your experience. So it's very important to be in contact with your member of Congress so that whenever you do go to meet with them, you have formed a relationship, and whenever they go to vote on a bill that may impact the rare disease community, they will think back on that relationship and what you've shared with them about your experience as a rare disease patient. And if you look here, you can see why legislative advocacy matters so much. This chart shows different ways that members of Congress said they were influenced when they voted on a bill or made a decision. And as you can see, the top influence for them is in-person visits from constituents. The next falling right under that is just any kind of contact to your representative. And then as you go down the list, you can see it differs from letters, emails, phone calls, town hall comments, visits from a lobbyist. So there's plenty of ways that you can make your voice heard and have an impact on the legislative process. And you can click one more time. Okay, maybe a few more times. So this slide shows you ways that you can engage with your member of Congress. Like I said, you could do in-person meetings, but with COVID, that's just not possible right now. So feel free to call your member of Congress's office. You can call their DC office or their district office. Town halls, visit town halls. Be sure to make comments and ask questions during those town halls. And as Lani was just, or not Lani was just saying, as Taylor was just saying, it's very impactful to connect with your member of Congress on social media. So absolutely utilize that tool. You can also do so through traditional media, letters, emails, and the letters and emails, you don't always have to write yourself. You could find an organization that offers action alerts like many organizations do. For example, the EveryLife Foundation, we have them on tons of different bills. So if you wanted to come in and send your member of Congress a letter about why the STAT Act is important to you, all you would have to do is put in your address and find your member of Congress, and there's a pre-written letter there for you. You can add to it, edit it as you want, but the letter's already there, and it's a great way to connect with your member. Writing op-eds, holding briefings through your rare disease organization, these are all great ways to engage. The most important piece is that you do make it personal. Members of Congress, they have tons of meetings every day. Their staff meet with tons of people every day. So be sure to connect with them on a personal level, not only by telling them your rare disease story, but finding similar connections between you and the member.
Thanks, Katelyn. So RDLA is an organization that your CMD partners with on advocacy. Obviously, our voice as a community is smaller, but when we come together with other rare disease communities, there's a lot of us. And so I am always monitoring and working with those organizations, and you can learn more about our partners on our website. But this is a statement of what our priorities are. I won't read it to you, but this is what guides the advocacy that we do as an organization in terms of signing on to letters and what we push out to our community. We have a specific page on our website that has to do with advocacy. So if you are interested in learning more and see some of the ways that you can get involved, all of that is on our webpage, and I update that as we get more and more resources. And just some simple ways that you can get involved immediately. Back in May, we did a session on advocacy at our 2021 virtual SciFam. You can go to our YouTube channel and watch that recording, and that gives you a lot more details specifically about legislative advocacy. Also, monthly, I send out a newsletter that updates you on current issues, things that we've signed on to, just to keep you informed of what we're doing as an organization. And of course, you can always email me. I have my Pure CMD email there. Otherwise, advocacy@purecmd.org is a great way to get me as well. So I just want to give you a couple examples of the bills that we're watching as an organization. As Katelyn said, the STAT Act is one that RDLA is putting a lot of time and effort into. We discussed it in February 2020 when I was in DC for Rare Disease Week. And again, I'm not going to read through all of this. I just posted a blog post on the Pure CMD blog that describes many of these things. But I like to explain, why would Pure CMD care about this? So in this case, the STAT Act would create a center of excellence devoted to rare disease at the FDA. Rare diseases don't always follow the traditional path of finding treatments and cures. And so this would really help get all the stakeholders at the table to talk about ways that we can get creative and create treatments and cures. Obviously, we want to be a part of that as we pursue that as an organization, and then also eventually getting it in front of the FDA. As Taylor mentioned earlier, newborn screening is really important. Obviously, we're not screening for any of the CMDs yet, but someday we might. And so we want to make sure that this program continues. As we know, the patient voice is really important when we're creating treatments and cures. And this particular bill would, again, get us a seat at the table so that the voice of the patient is included when considering approval of treatments and cures. Genetic counseling, obviously we all know how important that is. This bill would help us to have more access to it if you are on Medicare or even a private insurance. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm not going to give you all the nitty gritty, but if you're interested in policy, I'm happy to discuss this more. And then the last one is the Medical Nutrition Equity Act. And this is one that the PKU Alliance has put forth because for PKU, they rely heavily on medical foods. And some insurances do not cover it, which is a huge cost to the family. Our community uses some medical nutrition, not all, but again, if it affects our community, we want to be in support of that. And that's all I had to say. Again, I could go a lot deeper into these issues, but that's not the focus of today. So I'm always happy to have a call or email exchange with you if you have questions about the Pure CMD advocacy team. And then I'll turn it over to Stephanie. She's going to share a little bit about her experience being an advocate.
Hey, can everybody hear me okay?
You're good.
Hello? Good, okay. So I'm Stephanie and I have Lambda 2 congenital muscular dystrophy. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago. I was originally diagnosed as a baby with spinal muscular atrophy. And that just shows you how far research has come over the last 30 years. But there was no genetic testing back then for these similar disabilities. And it was just a guessing game pretty much, based on some limited testing and a lot of symptoms. I knew that was my world for 20 years, was SMA, and I wanted to do the research trial in 2010, and the lab needed the blood test to prove that's what you had to make sure that you're a qualifying candidate. I did the test and it came back negative. So for 20 years, all I knew was SMA, and I did tons of advocating. Sorry, I did tons of advocating for myself at hospital when I was sick, in school, in high school, and college, and also spreading awareness at the same time that it wasn't enough for me. I was doing small conferences and fundraising events. I was hosting and organizing my own fundraising events. Yes, it was a lot of work, but I wasn't reaching enough people. So when I became a member of the CMD community 10 years ago and joined Cure CMD, it changed my world. Like there's so much other advocacy out there that just then was learning about. And about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity through Cure CMD to join the advocates at the Rare Disease Week in Washington, DC in February. 2019 was the first time I went. And that was a whole new world. It was very intimidating at first, but Amy and Megan and all the other women that are veteran members of CMD were a huge help. They mentored me and helped me get through the week. And at the end, it was so rewarding to be able to reach out to these big political people that have a bigger voice than ours almost. And it's incredible. My second time was 2020, right before COVID. And I knew what I was getting into then because it was not my first rodeo. And I enjoyed every minute of it. I am not a political person. I absolutely despise politics otherwise. But this was amazing. And getting to be able to meet with the staffers of these representatives of my state, it doesn't feel like it's just their job to meet with you. They were legitimately interested in what you had to say. And it made me feel like I was actually making a bigger impact than what I had been able to do in the past. So if you ever get the opportunity to go to the Rare Disease Legislative Advocacy Week in DC, I highly encourage it. And I will put my info in the chat box if anybody has any questions for me about my experiences deeper or wants to just share anything, that's great. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I'll put my email in there as well. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was awesome. And really just gave an insight on what advocates' experience is, especially with legislative advocacy. So thank you so much, ladies. That was so informative. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Andrea on workplace and medical advocacy, and then Sondra is going to give us a little insight on her experience with workplace advocacy. So as you can tell, there are many forms of advocacy. So thank you for being with us today, ladies.
Okay, let me share my screen with you. Got some slides to go over. And thank you so much for having me here today to speak to you about workplace and medical advocacy. So first off, you may be wondering, what is workplace advocacy? Well, it's really just speaking up and asking for accommodations that allow your needs to be met in order for you to be successful on the job. A few applicable accommodations, and I won't read all of these to you, but I tried to pick some things that those in our community would be familiar with, would be obviously accessible parking space. You can see my lovely red reserved parking sign here. A big thing too for us is having assistance with getting indoors in our power chairs. And so of course, those doors that we can push a button for or scan our work badge, those are extremely important. And for those of us that have hand weakness, speech to text software and headsets, those are obviously things that would be useful accommodations. And for those that use mechanical ventilation that may need a midday break to use that, or even need some time to do cough assist therapy, or really tending to any other medical needs, a longer lunch break and or bathroom break is going to work really well to accommodate those needs. And probably the one that I've used the longest and really appreciate the most is the reduced hours schedule. And also too, you can request an accommodation for a flexible schedule. I noted here that these help with fatigue, but really if you have a caregiver that helps you get ready for work, that flexible schedule can be extremely helpful. And the one that most of us heard about more during the COVID pandemic than we ever had before, working from home. So how do you go about requesting an accommodation? Well, if you live in the US, we have something for workplaces with 15 or more employees called a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. And the process works by your reaching out to HR and you just share with them what accommodations that you are requiring in order to do your essential job functions. And those should be listed on your formal job description, and HR can help you to determine what those are. You'll have forms that you fill out, and in my case, my physician helped with all of that. She signed and returned those on my behalf. And your employer is going to be making a decision really as to whether or not that accommodation, or you may request multiple accommodations, whether that creates an undue hardship for them, or whether or not what you're requesting could pose a direct threat to your safety or that of others. And I know that direct threat item sounds a little odd, but think about maybe you request to not have to wear a mask in the workplace and they have a mask mandate. During a pandemic, you're not wearing a mask, and that could be a direct threat to your health safety as well as that of others. And of course, that accommodation is going to be approved or denied. The time frame on that is going to vary greatly depending on where you work, but generally a week to maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And if they deny that accommodation, obviously you have the right to appeal it. And depending on what state you live in, there may be some entities within your state that you could file a complaint with. Your disability rights organization within your state would be helpful in guiding you through that. And of course, you have the right to file a complaint on a federal level to the EEOC. And if you need more information about reasonable accommodations in general, I found that dol.gov, the Department of Labor website, was very helpful. So moving along to medical advocacy. Most of us that have rare disease have come to the realization that there are many clinicians that just don't have a clue about muscular dystrophy. So often we're the expert. And so we have to come up with a way to diplomatically, politely inform and educate those about our condition. There may even be times where you have to speak up to prevent harm from being done to yourself. Maybe it's a plan of care that you know is not appropriate, like the real common one that we have with respiratory care is the prescription of CPAP. And so that can be an awkward situation, but it's in your best interest to speak up. And often too, with regard to pulmonary care, we have to ask for a second opinion referral to a physician that is perhaps a neuromuscular disease specializing pulmonologist. That can be a really awkward situation, but generally the medical practice is going to behave very professionally about that, and it's going to be a smooth process to get your records transferred to the other physician. And also too, there are times that it's just not productive to continue a relationship with a clinician. So ending a relationship with a clinician, that too is medical advocacy. The 501c3 nonprofit that I founded, Breathe with MD Inc., really created as a result of a situation with my middle sister, Cheryl, having a respiratory crisis. This was in 2007. And at the time, we really relied on the emergency room and ICU staff to know what they needed to do. We just were not informed at all about respiratory involvement in neuromuscular disease. And because of that, we didn't know to speak up. We didn't know what was being done incorrectly. And through that experience, they made errors that unfortunately did result in her death. And so with our organization, what we're really trying to do is to help others be advocates for their own appropriate respiratory care. But in order to do that, they have to be informed about breathing muscle weakness. They have to be educated. So we spend a lot of time creating educational content for social media, mentoring, reaching out one-on-one, and helping people to understand what the appropriate options are for care, and to alert them that there may be clinicians that would prescribe things that could be harmful to them due to their weakened breathing muscles. So through all of that, we're equipping individuals to be advocates for their care and to help them to avoid a respiratory crisis. One of the things that we do in order to help with that is we have a respiratory care information card. It's really just a tangible reminder of some really critical facts that can help prevent a respiratory crisis. And if you live in the US, you can go to our website, breathewithmd.org, and request our respiratory information card, and we will mail that to you free of charge. And then lastly, we have something called a clinical considerations form. And excuse me, it's getting a little bit dried out there. So this form is a way for you to really open a dialogue with a clinician in order to help explain to them what respiratory involvement is and to alert them of those things that maybe they're prescribing to patients without neuromuscular disease that aren't harmful to them, but things that could be harmful to those of us with neuromuscular disease. So this form is just a concise way for you to share that. And we like to say that it's shared by the patient to the clinician, which could be a dentist, it could be a new clinician that you're seeing for the first time, maybe even a physical therapist, but we say that it's shared in the spirit of positive collaboration, really just to help ensure that they understand more about our respiratory needs that tend to be quite unique outside of their other patient populations. And so you can download this form from our website. just go to the resources link and click on the clinical considerations form. And that concludes my slides, but if you have any questions about anything that I covered here today, feel free to reach out to info@breathewithmd.org. Thank you.
Thank you. You can go, Sondra, sorry.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sandra Mermelstein. I have Bethlehem myopathy. I'm also a legislative advocate for Cure CMD and a recently retired teacher who is somewhat teaching and tutoring during the pandemic. Throughout my career in public schools, I was basically unaware of my condition until I was diagnosed, which actually wasn't until several years ago, along with another member of my family. As a teacher, I did experience some difficulties with muscular dystrophy and needed to self-advocate. And I was making my own accommodations. At first, this might have included sitting on the rug with children, either during reading to them, or we had to do so during emergency drills. Obviously, this was getting harder for me to do. Once I was diagnosed, I spoke with my supervisor about this and I didn't have to do this. Using stairs became more difficult, especially imagine having children behind you and carrying things in my hand. But I would self-accommodate by having the children carry what I needed. But eventually I was given a key to an elevator. I would also frequently fall in front of others. This was difficult to have to explain, but and another thing was fatigue. This got worse as I got older, but I found I was trying to take shortcuts. Getting out of a chair became difficult, but I would just sit high in a regular office chair. Some of my accommodations that had to be made, I know that Andrea mentioned them before. I did create some examples of job advocacy situations with muscular dystrophy. You can find more information about this from the Job Accommodation Network. If you Google that, it's also called JAN. This will be available in a link on the YouTube recording description. Anyway, I do have some good news. You're not alone with self-advocacy. 20% of the American workforce is diagnosed with a disability. And almost everyone will have a health concern while they're working. For me, I actually worked with someone who also had muscular dystrophy, and she was provided with a specific parking spot. Several colleagues needed surgery at one point while I did. So there was more than enough understanding. I worked with someone who had diabetes and couldn't go on field trips. Another teacher happily volunteered. So, and even one situation, a number of us were working in trailers with mold. It became a health concern. I know that Andrea, I believe, mentioned the EEOC. I might have gotten that organization wrong, but we actually contacted them and went through our union. It took a bit of time until we had a supervisor to work with us. But I think healthcare advocacy goes on all the time. So, but being a good self-care advocate, I felt that there's some things to keep in mind. And one is be resourceful, browse the internet, contact an employment agency, your alumni association, human resource departments, other individuals in your field, or with your diagnosis for advice. And I've also included a page of resources that again will be in the YouTube recording description. So one great resource is the Job Accommodation Network. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's an excellent comprehensive website. The second thing to keep in mind is be honest with yourself. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Know especially the specific job and work environment that's best suited for you. 3, be creative. your supervisor or human resources might not be able to come up with a solution, but you probably can, since you know what works for best for you. An example was, again, my having children carrying things for me. They love to be helpers, so it worked out perfectly. Be flexible. If your job situation changes and your position is no longer suitable for you, look for other opportunities, either within your company, place of employment, whatever that might be, or elsewhere. I know this can be tough, but do what works best for you, and stay positive. Whether it's your first job or a new one during your career, you know you're capable and can add a lot to whatever whatever you're doing. I just want to have to say it was really helpful for me to have a colleague who also had muscular dystrophy. She really was a great role model for advocacy. And I just want to bring up on this work advocacy webplace page that I referred to, that's going to be in the YouTube link. There are actually abilityjobfair.org will have job fairs for our community. Also in New York City, there's a site, www.respectability.org. It was a fantastic website that you can just go through and explore whatever point you are at in your career. And again, the Job Accommodation Network, it's also called AskJan, JAN.org. It's another excellent and comprehensive website that also includes specific accommodations that can be done for muscular dystrophies. So I wish you luck and happy exploring on the web.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was so informative for the workplace and medical advocacy. I definitely learned some stuff too. Okay, so finally, we're going to hear from Jake on travel advocacy. I don't know about you guys, but I sigh every time I hear all these crazy stories of people traveling with a disability because it is so stressful and ridiculous. But I hope we've all found a way to get away from our crazy lives and go on vacation safely, at least before COVID. So Jake found his voice on a GoPro sponsored backpacking trip where he alone with his wheelchair and a single bag backpacked across Europe and Chile, relying on being loud to navigate inaccessible streets and perceived stereotypes abroad. So I'm excited to hear what Jake has to say and learn some tips and tricks. Take it away, Jake.
Thank you so much. Let me go into, oh, I did not brush my hair well. Let me go into sharing my screen with all of you. So welcome to Accessible Travel. My name is Jake Hytken. And yeah, as you know, we know travel with a disability is challenging and there are often fears associated with it, depending on your needs, your medical equipment, your energy levels. And so with that, I had to learn a lot on the go. And I was really fortunate to get a sponsorship from GoPro to travel. And so right here on these main pictures, you see me in Rapa Nui, which is Easter Island. You see me in these two pictures over here, which is in Iceland. And one of the things I'm going to point out is my freewheel, which is probably one of the coolest and more affordable tools in terms of making your manual chair more able to go on different types of terrain. And we'll get a little bit more into that. So I am going to go through today the accessible travel accommodations and how to get what you need, self-advocating on the go when you're staying at a new place to suit your abilities, and how to use your voice to get adaptions you may need. I'm going to start with this little video about some work I did in, and I have a condition called down in Patagonia. Muscular dystrophy. The form is called collagen 6 myopathy, and I was born with it, and through my childhood, I was weaker than others. This is really cool. Whoa. And then I hit my adolescence and my body started changing. And between 14 and 16,
Crazy.
I was growing a lot.
I could do this.
And during that time, my body was growing, but my muscles were contracting and atrophying. So the ability to walk was something I was losing. I was unable to keep up with the growth spurt. And so during my adolescence, I started using a wheelchair. So a little bit about me before we get more into the travel. I have been working in tech for many years now. Notable companies that I've worked with are Lyft, Airbnb. Wheel the World was an organization for people with disabilities to go traveling. I've done consulting, which was in that video where I was at a resort in Patagonia, helping them improve their accessibility specifically at the resort. I'm currently at Snapchat, also known as Snap Inc. I'm a DEI manager, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'm focusing on employee resource groups, helping all underrepresented groups advocate for themselves, have a community at the workspace, and help build equity to fix essentially one systemic issue at a time. Here are some of the examples of things that I worked on at my time in tech. Up here is designing for access. When I was at Airbnb, I helped them create filters to specifically help people with disabilities pick and choose what they need in their home accommodations for their travel. Over here are some of the anti-discrimination and accessibility policies I built at Lyft and supporting them with, the rolling out of wheelchair accessible vehicles and also, how to educate the driver community on how to work with people's needs. And additionally, you might be noticing all these fun Bitmojis. This is one of the first projects I was really excited to come into Snap and to be able to support. Fun fact, the first iteration, which is using a manual wheelchair, is actually designed after my chair, which is very cool. But now you can go into Bitmoji and Snapchat and actually send yourself in a manual wheelchair. And so a lot of the work that I do in tech is also oriented around my experience of advocating for myself. I never thought I was going to be a DEI professional. Frankly, when I was in university, DEI wasn't really a well accepted field, and it's been on the rise. And so it's been really exciting to see these changes. So accessible travel accommodations and how to get what you need. It really comes down to this. I say home is where the safety net is because everything else is unpredictable. So I always like to say from myself, the one thing that I need when I travel is an accessible place to stay. It is the most important thing. That is your home base. Because everything else will be unpredictable, you should prepare for that. And so when you prepare for that, I want you to always feel that you know that you have a place where you can safely have a roof over your head, have a toilet you can access, have a bed that you can access, and feel safe in whatever environment you go to. An example of this picture with these two women in Amsterdam is that I am basically in a chair that was at the airport because my wheelchair was sent to the wrong country and I arrived in Amsterdam without my chair. So frankly, I made friends with them and I was like, I'm taking a chair from the airport. And that's really one of the main things that we're going to be just like, I wanted to just advocate is know your equipment you're going to need. Also, happy National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We are the most underhired, underrepresented group. And so I want to say that not everybody has opportunity to get equipment that is going to help them with travel based on their own finances or insurances. So I want to say that you should identify what is the core device that you may need and don't feel bashful or ashamed to do something like a GoFundMe fundraiser for that device, because we need to understand the socioeconomic economic differences for people with disabilities is a wide range, and it's okay to look for what you need. And so when you have safety of your home, really you make your experiences. Don't think as big of like, I want to do this excursion or that. It could be as simple as this, as going up in the park and painting a picture. So here I am, self-advocating on the go. So we're going to start with this video real quickly.
Excuse me. If anybody's really strong, could you help me get on a bus? Because they were refusing to help me. Hey, good people. Thank you. Let's go shame them.
So the reason I'm sharing this video is because this was me in the middle of Iceland, and frankly, like their accessibility is just not great. There's actually a lot of interesting systemic issues I don't get to go into today because with timing. That is the reason that I had to get loud. And one of those things about travel, you may notice that I have fun costumes over here. That's a personal choice because I'm a goof, and it helps me get the attention I need when I need to ask for assistance. That being said, you don't need to do it the way that I do it, but what you should start to practice, feel comfortable with, is being comfortable in that space of asking for help. Give yourself grace. Don't hold shame around the fact that the world was not built for you, so you need to advocate for yourself. There are going to be situations like here where I was in Paris, I was in the Louvre, and I met random strangers, and I had to use my voice to get the adaptions I need. Adaptions meaning people supporting me. Whoops, let me go backwards. So that is one of the things that you're going to have to do. Be a strong advocate by utilizing your voice. Don't be ashamed to ask for what you need. And the reality is that your disability, sometimes will dictate, how you do things, but it doesn't dictate what you're able to do. Feel empowered to start that first place that you think is dipping your toe. You don't have to go on an off-roading adventure. You just have to say, I want to immerse myself in a different culture. And so I'm going to end with this video of myself on Wheel the World with some other individuals with disabilities, pursuing things that we've always wanted to try.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good.
Hey.
Okay, this is your first experience. For that, you only have to breathe. You're gonna be with two instructors of us, okay? He's gonna take you down, he's gonna take you up, he's gonna go with you all the time, okay? When you are with the regulator in the mouse, you can cough, scream, you can...
You'll notice in this video that there's a group of us with disabilities, and we are all trying scuba diving for the first time. And we have people assisting us in the water, pulling us through. There are resources out there to find these incredible opportunities of people that are out in the world that are making adaptive experiences. And so, to be honest, depending on the country, depending on the regulations, they may not always be aware of how to work with your disability. So you want to make sure that you explain to them, that you work with them. And if you don't feel safe or you don't feel comfortable, you do not need to do anything you don't want to do. But put yourself out in the world and take a chance. And that might be with that great relaxing vacation or something a little bit more adventurous off-road. And so I invite you to feel free when we do a round of questions to ask me any questions, but know that you're not alone with wanting to see the world. You're not alone with wanting to go on an adventure. And that because of your disability does not mean that you are not able to get out in the world and try something that you've never tried before. Thank you for your time today. And I just want to say, celebrate yourself and put yourself out in the world.
I wish I could find that lost world.
Thank you.
That's been lost for...
Thank you so much, Jake. So now it's actually time for questions. So Kelly, take it away.
Okay, it looks like this is for our legislative advocacy team. Let's see. What advice would you give to get started with legislative advocacy if you have no political or legislative expertise? I don't know if Lani or Katelyn can handle that.
Yeah, I can take that one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Katelyn was having some Wi-Fi issues, so I'm not sure if she's still on, but I thought that I wouldn't be able to do it either when I first started doing advocacy. I wasn't terribly interested in politics. In fact, I avoided them pretty well. But the best way is to just talk with people who have done it. when I first went to Rare Disease Week, which is sponsored by RDLA, they have a whole day long conference preparing you to meet with your with your legislators. So they help you how to tell your story, creating an elevator speech, things like that. So there's lots of resources out there. I won't go to all of them, but I'm happy to provide them if you have further questions. And sometimes it's just as simple as writing an email to your legislators, and I can help you figure out who they are if you don't know, and figure out how to contact them as well.
Okay, so if you have a general question, I guess open to all of our speakers. What do you do if you seem to be talking about advocacy with a lot of people and addressing your concerns, but you can't seem to get a resolution? What would your advice be?
I would love to chime in here.
Yeah, go for it.
So, there's a lot of moments where advocacy shows up in, the political system, or even as we discussed about asking for workplace benefits. Unfortunately, we're not always going to get the things that we're looking for. And so I think that when you are choosing where and how you advocate, you should measure your own personal parameter of what you feel is your limit and how much energy you're going to associate to address an issue at whatever institution you're working at. If you feel that it's in a political space, maybe that they are not the right partners to be working with, maybe you should consider finding those right partners. If you're doing it at the workplace and you're not getting the accommodations you need, I would say that maybe that's not the right place of employment for you. But ultimately, I think that the most important thing about advocacy is finding who's going to listen. And if you don't find that people are going to listen and work with you, then it's okay to say, let's restart at the foundation and find those individuals.
Awesome. If there's any more questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A, the portal there. I see a couple raised hands. Let me see.
Yeah, I think some other people want to add stuff. So really just unmute, add anything.
I was going to say, find someone you feel comfortable with speaking to. At one point, I had 3 supervisors, and 2 out of the 3 were very helpful. And the third one, I just did not feel comfortable sharing information with. So go to who you feel most comfortable with, because that's probably the person who will help you the most.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, we'll start to wrap it up so people can keep enjoying their weekend. So, all right, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. A very big thank you to our speakers as well for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us. Hopefully they have inspired some of you to maybe give advocacy a try. Advocacy doesn't have to be time consuming. You can do as little or as big of an amount of advocacy as you want. And most things are virtual right now. So it's not like you have to fly across the country to join an event. Or you can just do social media advocacy like what Taylor and I do, which is a virtual, small but powerful act of advocacy and trying to make a change. So save the date for our next webinar, which is on November 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We are going to be highlighting the fact that a lot of people affected or affiliated with CMD are starting careers in CMD science, which is so cool and inspiring. So stay tuned for more info on that and our next webinars in the series. If you have any questions about the webinar or just any other Cure CMD programming, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Contact us at outreach@curecmd.org. I and our staff would be more than happy to answer any questions about anything. So we definitely want to keep the conversation going. So share with us what you learned on social media. Be sure to tag us at CareCMD is our universal handle. And make sure you also use the hashtag CMD advocacy when posting. If you don't already follow us on social media, our socials and handles are on the screen. So make sure you go check those out. We cannot wait to see your posts. We actually did a week-long social media challenge over the summer, and we update you on important steps. So if you follow us, you can be up to date on stuff like that. Well, thank you everyone so much, and we hope to see you soon. Have a great weekend, everyone.
And if you want to go ahead and register for our next webinar, I'm dropping that link right now in the chat for you. So if you want to go ahead and sign up for our next webinar, and if we didn't get to your questions, feel free to reach out to the outreach email for any follow-up questions you may have. Thank you. Yes, this will be available on demand on our YouTube. We will be sending out emails when it's live, so stay tuned for that.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.